James Levine, you earned your first Emmy nomination for American Horror Story franchise, in the Outstanding Music Composition for a Miniseries TV category. Were you thinking, all right, I got it this time, I've got it this year, I'm going to get that nomination, or was it a complete surprise to you?
Well, I've thought I've got it a few years in the past, maybe when I was a little younger. So I would say that I know not to take anything for granted. So I was pleasantly surprised, but I definitely wanted it for sure.
And how did you find out that you got the? Did you wake up at 8:30 in the morning, 5:30, and look at the list to see if you were there, or did Ryan Murphy contact you?
It's funny. I sort of had been really busy in the week leading up and totally forgot about it. But the night before, I was going to bed at midnight or 1 after working late, and suddenly it popped in my head, and I was like, oh man, and then I couldn't fall asleep, so I finally passed out, and someone who I work with called me at 5:30 and woke me up.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's probably one of the best 5:30 wake-up calls you could probably get.
It's pretty good. My wife was like, first of all, it's nice to hear you're so happy. Second of all, I can't believe you're so happy at 5. Who are you talking to that you're so happy at 5:30 in the morning?
Well, at least you had a good excuse for being that happy at 5:30.
Oh yeah, it was great. Yeah. No, it's awesome. It's an awesome feeling. Very, very excited. Very grateful.
Now I know you've been working with Ryan a lot for a while now, and so I want to actually kind of back up a little bit and see, how did you actually get into the profession you're in, into scoring for television, and how did you fall into this partnership with him?
Well, I mean, really, I had been living in Los Angeles for a couple years right out of college, and had written music for a lot of different things, and a music supervisor heard some music that I had written that he really liked and responded to, and he sort of put it in his back pocket. He was thinking about me for one project, and then that didn't happen, but I didn't, unbeknownst to me. And it turns out this music supervisor named PJ Bloom, who's like a really amazing, super talented, and like award-winning music supervisor who's also worked with Ryan, was working with Ryan on Nip Tuck, and he went into a meeting, and Ryan just couldn't find anybody that he felt represented what he wanted musically, and he heard this piece of music that I wrote, and they called me, and I went in for a meeting, and I got Nip Tuck, and that was in 2003, so 11 years ago. And so we worked together on that, and it's just amazing collaboration and partnership. And then we went on and did Glee after that, and we did Running with Scissors in between, and we did then American Horror, New Normal. So I feel really, really blessed and fortunate that to have a partnership like that and a creative collaboration where there's a lot of trust that he gives me, and he sort of lets me run with it. Once we find like a sound, then I get to sort of go free with him, and it's pretty awesome.
Well, speaking of pretty awesome, in that you submitted the finale of American Horror Story, Coven, the Seven Wonders, and the opening was Stevie Nicks.
Yes.
Having her original song in there. How was it? Was there any nerves working with a legend like her, and just being both musicians but in different aspects?
Well, it certainly raises the bar, It's like, what are you gonna do? You're like, you got a living legend, and we were fortunate enough to see Stevie Nicks perform a few weeks ago at a Coven event at Fox.
Right.
It was just sort of something where you sit back. I mean, I don't really have to interact with her creatively, fortunately, although I would love to. But like, my job is quite a bit different than what she does. But you feel there's a responsibility that if you're going to have your music alongside somebody like that, you want to make sure that you can stand by it 100%, and and just know that you've literally been as truthful and honest with your music as she has with hers.
Right. I couldn't even imagine what you would how you would even follow up to that. But
you just kind of close your eyes and go into a state of if I worry about it, it's really not going to get the job done. So, you kind of just have to trust yourself, do your thing, and then, hopefully what comes out the other side is decent,
It's very true. And what did come out was in rewatching the finale, it sounded like you in this episode you actually had quite a bit of fun. I mean, usually there's like we wait for in something in horror the combination of like an eerie piano or a creepy cello or like violin, scratches. But this one, it seemed like it took on a more modern take, and also it seemed like you were writing for two different episodes, because the first half was like the competition part, which was great, and then the last half you had Fiona dealing with her cancer and trying to resurrect Zoe back from the dead, and Madison getting her what for. So how difficult is it to do that, and what made you go with the modern take in the first part of it?
Well, throughout the season, really from the very beginning, Ryan wanted the score to be very contemporary, very modern. So we sort of rode the line throughout the season with a lot of the younger witch themes and motifs, and those were essentially really contemporary sounding things. Heavy synths, heavy electronic percussion, along with horror elements. But my job and what I tried to do was take these disparate worlds and put them together. And every season of American Horror Story, I try to find a way to make horror with a non-traditional horror, palette. So how do you make horror out of electronic music or something that's like 1970s synthy or something? It's just something I work to do. So for this episode in particular, you're right, I did have a lot of fun with it, because by this time it was just we had covered so much ground musically and thematically that first opening sequence, the Seven Wonders, the contest to see who's the Supreme, was just like it's just like a thrill ride, for me, and I hope for people watching it. I sort of just like let loose with every single cool sound. I had spent so many hours working and found a way to weave it all together. And then I also wanted to have this like stark emotional shift, like you're talking about, halfway through the show. So it's like, okay, this is different, this is youthful, this is fun, and then as soon as you get comfortable being like sort of relaxed and like, oh, this is fun, this is sexy, I just wanted to sort of like turn you on your what, and take you down the darker path, as we did, and so this episode is special, I think, because it really touched on every sort of musical idea that we had throughout this season, was sort of able to rear its head throughout this episode.
Yeah, and you could totally tell that. And you had also told me at the recent Coven event that we were, that each of the major characters that you had or that were in Coven, you kind of had their own theme for them. And so when they all come together in this episode, was it difficult to kind of combine those things, or did you just wipe those away and it was just one brand new Seven Wonders episode theme that you went with?
No, it's really it's a little bit of both. I found you always try to find delicate and inventive ways to weave different character themes together in a show or an episode that's like this, where it's sort of a culmination episode of a lot of different stories coming together. So I think certainly for the first part of the episode, I needed to drive the action forward through the contests, and so that was sort of my challenge was twofold. It was to propel the action in a fun way and make it like exciting and enjoyable and sort of, it's a fun thing to watch. But throughout that, I weave in different character motifs and pieces and sounds, so it feels familiar. It doesn't just feel like a piece of music that's unrelated to you if you've been watching the prior, 12 episodes. And then towards the latter half of the show, I was able to, create a few newer themes, but really also, wrap up like the Axeman theme and, Fiona's theme and stuff like that.
Now, do you actually do you read the script before you score? I know sometimes you said that sometimes the writers or the producers will say just go off the script and score it off that, and then sometimes you watch it visually. In this one, what did you how did you do that? Did you combine both, or did you only go off script or
Well,
go off
I
visual?
I I read the script. I always read these scripts. And in this case, I just started writing. I mean, I have by reading the scripts by the 13th episode, by the season finale, I can read a script and know, okay, I'm going to try this theme here, I'm going to try this sound here, I'm going to try to do this. So I have a rough idea in my head of what I'm going to do. In this one, it was closer to that, where I had read the script, but I knew like the first 7 minutes were going to be really hard work for me. When I read it, I was like, oh shit, it's gonna just keep. This is gonna take so much time, because it's hard, it's very technical, and also, I want to always make it very musical, so it feels very natural, even though I'm trying to propel you through the contest.
And how did you go about doing that? I mean, because you had also mentioned that you're strictly a piano guy. Piano is your thing. With this
hmm
more modern techno kind of sounding music, how did you get a feeling for that? Did you just use a keyboard, or did you use other instruments as well?
Oh, this is like, I mean, I've always been a synth guy, so and used samplers and programmed music and stuff like. Just because I play piano, but I've worked on writing all different kinds of music, and so I just sort of went into the laboratory a bit and got some new toys, new synths, some new acoustic instruments that we sampled for some of the more effecty horror stuff, and just started developing. On every project, and on this one, I worked really hard to develop a palette so that you have a sound, you have a sonic signature, and so that can be anything. It can be live instruments, computer instruments, samples, drum loops, anything and everything. That's the beauty of technology, I think, and what we do is that certainly for me, I try to learn the technology so well that it really informs and helps support the creative process for the sound and the musical and audio world that I'm trying to develop for a show.
And do you tend to take more time with like season premieres or season finales in the score than you do kind of the other, let's say, 12 or I'm sorry, 9 or 10 episodes it'll be, or does each one get its own time? Like how long does it take to actually do a score for something like this?
Well, I mean, truthfully, usually for the first episode or the premiere or the first couple, you just because of the schedule, you have more time. By the end of the season, you've run out of time, so you're really pushing and crunching pretty hard. But I would say it always takes a little bit more time at the beginning, and I think I always like to have as much time in the beginning as I can because I know that there's going to be a lot of you know I call it like my vomit phase where I just literally every idea I have I just start recording it and writing it and creating it, and it's sort of just like I'm just like letting all this crap out so that ultimately something's going to come out and you'll be like, oh, that's kind of weird, and usually it's by accident, but without having that time and that phase of the creative process, it's really tough. It's just never the magic never it just never happens. You never really it's tricky, It's tricky to find it. And sometimes like finding the right sound or the magic just it's elusive if you're really if you're trying and pushing too hard, and it's usually like 8 degrees away from the idea you think you had, but you stumble upon this other thing and it becomes something that's interesting or that people respond to.
Right, yeah. And speaking of responses, you had mentioned that you work closely with Ryan Murphy on some of these scores. I know you guys, like I mentioned, have been a team for a while now. So with something like Coven, when Coven came around, did you already have themes in mind that you presented to him, or did you guys collaborate at the beginning to go over these certain themes, and then from that spawned the composition for the rest of the series?
I'd say the latter. It was more along the lines of he kind of had an idea about, hey, what if we make this like Giorgio Moroder, 1980s, 1970s, like disco electronic for horror. What is that? What's going to happen? So that was like my marching order, and then we collaborate at the beginning. I'll start doing my work and doing my research and coming up with sounds and ideas, and then once I start getting picture, from what they've shot and filmed, then I start putting things up against picture, and when I feel like I have something fairly decent, then I'll send it over and we'll watch it together and talk about it.
And what did you find this season with Coven in terms of scoring that was different from doing Murder House and Asylum? Was it harder? Was it easier because you did have these action elements in it, and the other ones skewed darker, or was it more challenging because the other ones were so similar in being dark in a few places, but still kind of light?
They've all been so different from where I sit, and what I've had to do on all three has been, for me, it's been radically different. I mean, it's made me a much, much better composer, I think, because, they really demand the charge from Ryan and from him and from ourselves is to make every season feel completely unique and different. So each season, represents its own set of challenges. The first season for me, the challenge was creating a horror score, but I'd never done horror before, so I had to sort of figure out what was going to work for me, and I purposely didn't want it to be very cliche or campy. And then the second season was just going back, and because of the period, sort of dialing the horror back a little bit in terms of when the show was taking place. And then this season, really, the biggest challenge was mainly finding a way to do horror and make these girls dark and mysterious and sexy and dangerous and horrific, using sort of elements that maybe wouldn't necessarily be considered dark, dangerous, and and horror.
Or sexy.
Yeah. Well, I think the Siths are sexy. I think that we have that going for us. I think we could do that. But yeah, the girls are pretty sexy. We don't have to do that much work for them.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now, so the show itself did garner 17 Emmy nominations this year.
I know. Awesome.
Which was just great. Can you tell us, what do you think the reason for this kind of reception from the Academy and just from fans all over had to do, or how it came about with Coven? Because again, when it was a completely different story from the last two, as they're each their own individual stories, but this one just seemed it had to do with witches, and the other one was an asylum, the other one was a ghost story. What do you think was different that made this season work so well?
Well, I think, for the fans, I think that there was a youthfulness to the story and to the essence of who the Coven was created for. You know what I mean? It's a place for outside, young women who feel like outsiders or who are outsiders because they're witches. So it addressed a lot of maternal issues and sort of issues that young women maybe face on a daily basis. Women that are the same age as the younger actresses in our show. What it also did was, because of the level of the writing and the production and what Ryan worked so hard to do, the show attracts a tremendously talented group of actors. So what I think it did was, you have this quality of writing, quality of production, quality of performance, youthfulness, and so you're bringing something really fantastic to people that are watching television in a very mature way. So you're getting younger women to appreciate actors who maybe they haven't seen before, like Jessica Lange or Sarah Paulson or Kathy Bates or Frances Cartwright. So it's just like you're creating a wonderful place to get really modern, edgy, dark entertainment and it just struck it struck a chord with younger viewers, which is fantastic. It's something it's who you want to be watching your stuff, so it's fantastic. It's awesome. For the Emmys, I mean, I think they probably they recognize the same thing. We had a great year. It was awesome. It was new. It was fresh. It was like nothing else on television. And we balanced a little campiness with horror and relationships and maternal issues, and it was just great. Really, really wonderful to be a part of it.
Now, speaking of like nothing else on television, you guys have got Freak Show coming up, and that's getting a lot of fans excited, a lot of people excited, a lot of buzz surrounding it.
Yeah.
Have you started thinking already of what you're going to be bringing to the table in terms of the score for it? I mean, is it going to be circus-like? Is it, you don't have to spill any details, but have you already been in that process? Do you start working as far in advance? Yeah,
I do. I've been reading the scripts and started sort of researching circuses a little bit, and we'll see. I don't know yet. That's the short answer. Sometimes we might go down a path that feels like it makes sense, intellectually, but then when you put it up against picture, it's totally wrong. So it's really hard to say, And I wouldn't say if I knew anyway. So.
Yeah, that's really true. For your own job safety.
Yeah, come on. You know better than that.
We just want to congratulate you again on your Emmy nomination. It's 3 weeks until you guys are at the Creative Arts Emmys, where yours is handed out. I believe it's August 16th or 18th. I don't have a calendar.
16th.
August 16th. 16th. There you go. Well, you already know.
Saturday the 16th.
You're getting your tux ready.
Yeah, exactly. Come on, it's being pressed right now. Getting ready.
Well, we look forward to seeing you there. And again, best of luck. We'll be rooting you on over here.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.